that Tony Abbott joins us now. Tony Abbott, welcome to you and thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. We're going to start by talking about trade. We may get a trade deal between the UK and Australia tomorrow. Scott Morrison, I believe, is going to be heading to Downing Street. Obviously, a trade deal has been much discussed between our two countries. It may be signed and sealed by tomorrow. What do you say to those upland farmers in the UK, the more isolated parts of the UK, the sheep farmers, and in the lowlands, the cattle farmers as well, who feel they are in a really unfair fight, depending on the type of deal we sign with Australia? They can't possibly compete. So our small family farms with your gigantic hill stations and cattle ranches. What say you to them?
First of all, let me say I am reasonably confident that this deal will happen because Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson are both very forward-looking leaders who want what's best for their respective countries and also want what's best for the wider world. Now, I can understand change being anxiety-inducing. We are naturally change-resistant. But I've lived in Britain. I think I know Britain pretty well. British agricultural produce is good produce. And this idea that British lamb and beef farmers are going to be driven out of business by rapacious Aussies is just wrong. Apart from anything else, they're different sorts of producers. British producers tend to be high-end producers. Our producers tend to be mass market producers. And we don't have the surplus, frankly, of agricultural products to dump on Britain, even if we wanted to. And in any event, as I understand the negotiations, there will be a pretty extensive transition period that will give both sides a chance to adjust.
I think one of the misgivings, or part of the misgivings that UK farmers have, is that this deal may be a template for others. That although the sums involved between UK and Oz are relatively modest, it may provide a model for a deal with South American countries, with America as well. And then we get into another question, and it's, I've got farmer friends and they remind me of this regularly, and they point to, they say, look at COVID, look at what's happened during COVID and the fragility of our logistics supply lines, our just-in-time supply lines. Look at what happened when the Evergreen tanker jackknifed in the Suez Canal. We are a country, a small island, that produces now just a little over 50% of all the food we need to feed our people. From a strategic point of view, a government has to make sure, that the next virus might not be a biological one, it may be digital, and then all those supply chains are in jeopardy. We need to be able to feed people with our own food. We can't rely on imports.
Well, Britain always has relied on imports. You currently import over 40% of your food, and why not add to the sources of food you can import high quality, good value food from Australia? Look, it baffles me a little that so many people in Britain are always running the country down, always taking counsel of fears, not hopes. No country has had more impact on the modern world than Britain. When you think of the mother of parliaments, the rule of law, democracy, the Industrial Revolution, the emancipation of minorities, Britain can cope. And a trade deal with one of Britain's greatest friends, namely Australia, that's no threat to the people of Britain. This is going to help the people of Britain because we will stand beside the people of Britain through thick and thin in the future, as we have in the past.
If I can just move you on to something we've been speaking about this morning, which has been, illegal migrant crossings, which have been on the rise this year. Of course, your government in 2013, you brought forward Operation Sovereign Borders, which took a kind of no-nonsense approach to illegal migrant crossings. Now, we've heard a lot, especially across the Brexit campaign, about bringing in an Australian-style points-based immigration system, and of course that's for legal migration. You're advising the government on the Board of Trade. If you were advising the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, would you also be advising her to perhaps consider an Australian-style approach to illegal migration as well?
Look, I don't say that our migration system is perfect, but I do think that any system which depends upon the people coming in legally having a job from day one at market wages plus is a good system, because where people can come to our country, join Team Australia or Team Great Britain, whichever it might be, and contribute from day one, that is what we want. And that has been one of the great strengths of both our countries, that people can come to Britain, they can come to Australia, make a new home there, and be first-class Australians, first-class Britons very, very quickly. Look, on illegal migration by boat, this is a dreadful, dreadful problem. It's a deadly problem, as you're finding, as we found. And frankly, no one who comes illegally by boat should be allowed to stay, because if they are allowed to stay, it provides the people smugglers with a product to sell. And if they've got a product to sell, away they'll go. Now, I know people are keen to get to countries like Britain and Australia. They're very desirable places to live. But if you lose control of your borders, migration generally becomes a huge problem. And the only way there's going to be popular support for legal migration is if illegal migration is kept very, very rigorously under control. The point is, if you come the wrong way, you must not be allowed to stay. The British government needs to say to the people smugglers very firmly, the way is closed. It's not as if they're leaving an unsafe country in France. Anyone who leaves France illegally needs to go back pronto.
Tony Abbott, we haven't got very long and a lot of ground to cover. I note that you were a student at Oxford some years ago. I'm guessing you've been watching watching with interest what's been happening at various Oxford colleges, Magdalen College, Oriel College as well, which have been much in our media over here. Not just students, we expect students to dissent, but academics as well, and lecturers working to rule because they don't like a decision to leave a particular statue in place, for instance, in the case of Oriel. What do you make of what's happening on British campuses and our academic elites? What could be done by those people who object to that cancel culture that they seem to be propagating?
Abominable self-hatred, that's what it is. Have a bit of pride in your country. Have a bit of respect in your institutions. Britain is not a racist country. There may be one or two racist individuals. Britain is not a racist country. Other than Australia, I can't think of a freer or fairer country than the United Kingdom. Respect the achievement. Look at the Boris Johnson cabinet, probably the most multicultural cabinet in the world. This is a sign that people can come to Britain from anyone and do extremely well. So leave the portraits of the Queen in the common room, leave the statues of Cecil Rhodes at Oriel College, and get back to making Britain better rather than running the place down.
And Tony Abbott, can we get back to coming back to Australia or travelling to Australia? I asked that as somebody whose eldest daughter hopes to do her master's degree in Adelaide next Easter, but it's looking increasingly like Fortress Australia when it comes to COVID restrictions. When will you start letting people back in?
It's a very good question, and I am aghast at the virus hysteria that seems to be running rampant in so many places, and now it's being compounded by vaccine anxiety. Look, COVID is serious. It's not just the flu, but sooner or later we are going to have to live with this thing. And once you've got a reasonable percentage of the population vaccinated, we are going to have to go back to normal. And as Theresa May said in the Parliament the other day, the new normal might not be exactly like the old normal. Yes, sadly, some people will die of COVID, just as they sadly die of the standard flu, but we just have to live with this thing. And as soon as we've got reasonable vaccination rates, we can do that as safely as possible in the real world.
Well, we'll look to see whether your predictions for a trade deal tomorrow, being signed and sealed with Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson, come true. And in the meantime, we'll say thanks very much for your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.